Hey everybody, it's Hayden from Connect here. If you're just finding us for the first time, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, stay up to date for all the future content that's coming. So this video, we're going to talk about how to set up and prepare your data model and your schema. Before we go into Power Query and talk through the relationships, let's just show you, Microsoft has a website. If you do a search for Power BI Docs and Star Schema, you'll find this page here. I'll include a link in the video in the comments below. This video really talks about what a star schema is. First of all, if you don't know what dimensions and fact tables are, if you do, I'm sorry, I'm just going to give a quick 20 seconds on them. It's really about your dimension tables and your fact tables. Your dimension tables really are tables that you want to filter on, tables that you want to interrogate your data by. So think of things like a date. You want to dimension your costs by date, by salesperson, by region. You want to see your volume by country, etc. So those are your sort of dimensions that you need to think about. The next are your fact tables. And in my mind, they're almost your transactional data. So things like your orders, your shipments, things where you will derive cost from, things where you'll derive volumes from, metrics, numbers that you want to use against your dimensions. So you may want to see how much your shipping costs were in January by customer. So that would allow you to use your dimensions and your facts together. The star schema here really is around how you have your fact table sort of in the middle. It doesn't matter how you structure it, whether it's top or up and down. And you've got your dimension tables that you use to filter your fact tables. So let's just jump into Power BI and I'll show you what I mean. So I've got this data model here. You can buy this data model, by the way, through the Connect website if you're interested. It gives you quite a lot of information to go practicing your modeling. So what we have, we've got shipments and orders. Yeah, so I'll just move those next to each other. So the shipments and the orders are my transactional data. They're showing me the volumes, they're showing me the costs, they're showing me the dates, when did things happen. So these are the sort of key transactional tables that I want to understand that I'm going to deduce my facts from. The rest here are all dimension tables. So I want to dimension my shipping cost by carrier, my contacts, my customer contacts, who is buying the most from me, modes, what type of transportation mode, what's my most successful salesperson. So using the fact and dimension table, you can really now start to picture how you want to build your schema. So bear with me 1 second, I'm just going to make a quick change, and just like that I've sorted my tables. So I've now just created a folder or a group here called facts and dimensions. You don't need to do this. It's just for the purpose of this video to show you some of the ways that people do this. They sometimes put dim and fact before the table name. So they're really highlighting the fact that a dimension or a fact table. Now, when you're planning to prepare and think about your schema, you want to have as little information in your fact tables as possible. So let me give you an example. In shipments table here, I have the salesperson and I have the sales ID. This information sits here. So I've got the ID and salesperson. Therefore, I don't need the salesperson in this table. All I'm doing is taking 35 rows of data from that table and extrapolating it 5,000 times. I'm increasing the size of my data model unnecessary, and therefore by removing this, I am making my data model more efficient. And you need to do that for all of your tables. If you, in an example here, I've got my carrier and carrier name, carrier ID and name. If you don't have your carrier table, you can just duplicate this table, remove all the other data and group by. You're creating a smaller data model. So I'm just going to go and delete some of these columns. So there, I've just removed a number of columns from my data model. Carrier, mode, rate. These are just unnecessary data that I just don't need, or they already exist in another table because I have the IDs. I have the salesperson ID again. Last one here, contact name. Let's get rid of that. So I've now got a more efficient table. What I need to think about next is building my relationships. The the IDs that I have in these tables, the contact IDs, the customer's ID, salesperson, all of those IDs are all in the other tables. That's fine. My model will connect properly. What you then also need to think about is your dates. So Best practice is to have your own date dimension table loaded into Power BI. I have videos on that. I'll share a link in the comment section on how to create a table in DAX or Power Query. And you want to use your date dimension table to connect to this table. Now, one of the issues that I've come across in the past when looking at why things don't work when people have set things up, if I wanted to build a date table and relate it to my planned dispatch date, I can't, because it's got a time in there. Your date, if you're just using a date column, is always the date and at midnight. So what you'd need to do in these instances is separate these dates out to multiple columns. So I can duplicate that column. I can set this to time. And I can set the other one just to a date column. There we go. So that will allow me in my model now to connect my date dimension table and relate it to planned dispatch date if I so wanted. So this is where you need to give a little bit of thought around your data on what your data model will look like, how you want the relationships to be built. You can then close and apply this, and you'll find out if it doesn't work through trying to build relationships through some of your reports. Other things to be very wary of is make sure that you set the numbers, so the finance fields as currencies, text. Make sure you've just got all of your columns set out right. You can always come back and change them if they're wrong, but just try and get it right at the start to save you having to jump in and out of Power Query. Right, so now into the relationships. Right, so now here we are in the relationships. We've designed our data model in Power Query, we've hit close and apply, and what Power Query has done and Power BI has done is it's tried to understand my relationships, and it's built these for me. So where we've got contact ID, if you can see that anything that's got the same column name, contact ID here, if I highlight that, it automatically connected to those. It understands that I've only got one unique record for each of these locations, so it's got the 1 here and the asterisk to many. So thinking back to the star schema that we saw in the Microsoft website around the Power BI star schema, it's built that exactly how I want it. Now there are some issues with the way it's been built. It appears that I have the salesperson ID in both the orders and the shipments. So looking at this model now, what you can see is that there's 2 fact tables. We've been through that in the Power Query. You'll see that a lot of documentation only really talks about having 1 fact table, but a lot of the business that I work with has 2. You've got your orders, your shipments, sometimes you have your invoices. So there could be multiple facts tables that you want in your model. And I'm going to need at some point to relate my facts to my shipments. So if I bring in a date dimension table and I link the date to my order date, I want that to filter into my shipments. This here I need to remove. So I only want the salesperson connected to my orders. I'll show you why. If I try and connect my order ID to the order ID on the shipment, it creates an inactive relationship, because an active relationship would cause some ambiguity between these. So I'm going to delete this one and go to now I've done that, I can go into this one, go to the properties, and make this relationship active. I also need to set the filter, the filter direction to both. What that means is when I filter anything on my shipments table through these dimensions table, it will then filter here. So we've now got that relationship. If I wanted to see by customer or order the shipping date or the cost of shipping to that location, I've got that information built in the relationship. Okay, so that's your star schema structured. A couple of other things to think about. This here is, you can see the arrows here, they're one directional. The modes, sorry, the dimensions always filter the fact tables. That's correct. So just going to give you an example of where sometimes your users might want something different. So speak to your users. I'm going to create a couple of slices. So just pause the video. I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've got my 2 slices on the table, and I've just got the total actual cost here from the facts table just to show you. So if I was to pick a carrier, I'm going to select connect transport. That will filter my model to the relevant amount of cost. Now what I have down here is I have the modes. Now I know that connect transport doesn't use LTL. But my user might not know that. They might be looking for how much they want to see the LTI, which is less than truckload. If I select that, I get a blank. Okay, I don't want my users to do that sometimes. Sometimes they will get frustrated with this type. So how to get around that is we can set both of these relationships to bidirectional. So whenever I filter this table with the carrier, it will apply a filter to the modes. So I'll just set those up. So as you can see, I've now got my arrows going both ways. So my shipments table is filtering my modes and carriers table. Lots of people in the BI community will be shuddering at the thought of this, I can tell you. However, think about your users. Now that I've selected Connect Transport, it only has a 7.5 ton rigid vehicle. So if I now select Courier, it will only show me Swift Logistics. Road Warriors. So it's filtering the mode, and the mode is filtering the carrier name. So my users aren't going to be able to select options within their slicers that provide no information. So that's just a usability feature that your users might like. The next thing about usability that's really important is, as we've seen, we've got lots of ID fields here. And when I'm looking through the tables, we've already organized this data really well for them. So we've got customers, modes. I'm not having to search through a whole shipments table and scroll down and see all the customer data, to see all the product data. It's just not there because we don't need it. So in here, when you see your tables here, you see the IDs. You can right click on these and you can select hide in report view. Alternatively, you can hover over an ID. You can select this eye visibility and just hit click and it will hide them. So I've just gone and completed all that. All of my ID fields are now invisible. Now, you don't want to delete them from your model because they're very important on how you build your relationships. You just don't want your users to see them. So if you look at all of the information that's available in my orders table, jumping into the report view, you can see I've only really got the key information that the users are going to want to use on their facts. The dates, the quantities, the kilos, the volumes. Here on the shipments table, no longer have I got the unnecessary shipment ID. It all adds to that user experience. Your users probably won't thank you for it because if you've done it right, they won't know how good you've done it. But they will somehow appreciate what you've done and enjoy using your solutions. So that's it on schemas, on preparing your data model. Maybe you've got a lot of things that you want to go back. Maybe in the comment section talk about where you've done this in the past and how you're going to go and change, and how your approach needs to change, because it's really important. So not only have we just made the user experience good, we've reduced the amount of data in our data model. We've made it easier to filter and slice data. We've made it much more efficient, faster refresh, it's optimized, and it's just much better. Okay. Right, that's it from me. So please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for all the future stuff, and take care. And as it's the UK and it's February the 16th, happy Pancake Day. Thanks, goodbye.